Some wars are fought with soldiers, some are fought with machines, and some are decided far from the battlefield, inside quiet buildings filled with wires, circuit boards, and assembly lines. Last night, one of those buildings caught fire. Not a barracks, not a fuel depot. A drone factory in southern Russia, and when it burned, it didn't just destroy metal and machinery. It disrupted the system that sends death across the sky, one drone at a time. What happened in Taganrog may look like just another strike. In reality, it was an attack on the future of Russia's war. The target, Taganrog, sits on the northern edge of the Sea of Azov, a quiet-looking port city in southwestern Russia. But behind its warehouses and shipyards lies something far more important than it appears. This is where the Atlant Aero plant operates. Not a civilian factory, not a commercial workshop. A facility dedicated to building the drones that now define Russia's war. Inside Atlant Aero production lines assemble Molniya strike drones, small fast UAVs designed to hit Ukrainian positions with explosive payloads. Other lines manufacture reconnaissance drones that search for targets, spotting troop movements, artillery positions, and infrastructure from the sky. And parts for Orion drones, Russia's long-range combat UAVs, are also produced here. These drones are not side weapons. They are the nervous system of Russia's battlefield. They locate targets, they guide artillery, they correct missile strikes, they terrorize cities. Without drones, Russian forces lose their eyes, their precision, and their ability to apply pressure deep behind Ukrainian lines. That's why Ukraine didn't aim for the drones in the air. It aimed for the place where they are born. The security service of Ukraine, working with the Ukrainian Navy, launched a long-range drone strike directly against Atlant Aero. Not to send a message, but to interrupt a supply chain that feeds thousands of future attacks. And when the drones hit, witnesses reported a fire followed by a series of loud explosions, consistent with a facility filled with fuel, electronics, and assembled UAVs. Russian officials later confirmed that an industrial plant had been struck, along with nearby buildings and infrastructure. No casualties were reported, but something far more important was lost: time, production, and momentum. How the strike unfolded. The attack did not arrive with warning. There was no mass barrage, no wave of missiles to draw attention, just a few distant radar blips drifting toward the southern Russian coast. At first they looked ordinary, but small, slow, easily lost among background noise. By the time local air defenses reacted, some of the drones were already too close. Searchlights cut across the sky. Anti-aircraft fire echoed over Taganrog. Russian officials would later claim 7 drones were destroyed, but one didn't need many. One was enough. Moments later, a flash lit up the Atlant Aero complex, then another. Witnesses described a fire spreading through the facility, followed by a series of loud explosions, the kind you only hear when fuel, electronics, and assembled hardware ignite together. Emergency crews rushed in. Streets were blocked. Power flickered across nearby districts. By morning, the factory was no longer a quiet industrial site. It was a blackened, smoking symbol of how vulnerable Russia's war machine had become. Not on the front line, but in the places where that war is built. Why this one strike matters. To understand why Atlant Aero was such a high-value target, you have to look at the scale of Russia's drone war. Drones are no longer a support tool for Moscow. They are the backbone of its strategy. In just the first 10 months of 2025, Russia launched more than 44,000 drones against Ukraine. That's not a campaign. That's an industrial output being weaponized. It's 4 times more than Russia used in all of 2024. Every night, Ukrainian air defenses face waves of unmanned aircraft, some armed with explosives, others scouting for artillery and missile strikes. They drain interceptors, they exhaust crews, they terrorize civilians. To sustain that tempo, Russia needs factories running without pause. That's why Moscow invested heavily in domestic drone production, building facilities like Atlant Aero to replace Iranian imports and create a self-sufficient drone industry. In 2025 alone, Russia produced around 30,000 Shahed-style drones inside its own borders. Each one is cheap compared to a missile. Each one forces Ukraine to spend far more to shoot it down. That economic imbalance is deliberate. So when Ukraine struck Atlant Aero, it wasn't attacking a building. It was attacking a system designed to flood the skies with weapons faster than defenses can keep up. A single destroyed production line doesn't just stop today's drones. It cancels tomorrow's attacks. Hundreds of airframes never assembled. Thousands of components never installed. Waves of future strikes quietly erased before they ever launch. That is why this fire in Taganrog matters far beyond the city itself. It weakens Russia's ability to sustain drone warfare, and not for hours, but for weeks. And in this war, weeks can decide everything. In Ukraine, doesn't have to outproduce Russia, it just has to out-target it. That's the logic behind strikes like the one on Atlant Aero. Shooting down drones is defensive, destroying drone factories is strategic. Ukraine has been steadily building a long-range drone force not to win dogfights in the sky, but to reach deep into Russian territory, where the war is manufactured. This is industrial warfare. Instead of focusing only on frontline positions, Ukraine is now hitting production plants, storage facilities, logistics hubs, because modern war is no longer decided only by who holds territory. It's decided by who can keep producing weapons faster, and Ukraine has become remarkably good at this. Kyiv now produces roughly 4 million drones every year, more than all NATO countries combined. Small surveillance UAVs, long-range strike drones, maritime and land systems. That gives Ukraine something Russia can't easily counter: volume, flexibility, and reach. Every month, Ukrainian drones fly farther into Russian airspace, hitting targets once thought safe. Atlant Aero was not a one-off. It is part of a campaign to choke Russia's drone pipeline, forcing Moscow to spend more, defend more, and produce less. And every time a factory burns, that pressure grows. The fire in Taganrog will eventually be put out, walls will be rebuilt, machines replaced, production lines restarted. But the message from this strike will last much longer. Russia now has to defend not its borders, but its factories, its workers, and its supply chains. Every drone plant becomes a potential target, every warehouse a possible front line. That forces Moscow into a costly dilemma. Either spread air defenses across thousands of kilometers of territory, or accept that Ukraine can reach deep into the industrial heart of its war effort. Neither option is cheap, neither is easy. And for Ukraine, this is exactly the point. By hitting production instead of only weapons in the air, Kyiv is turning Russia's biggest advantage, mass, into a vulnerability. The more drones Russia tries to build, the more factories it has to protect. The more infrastructure it creates, the more targets it gives Ukraine. Atlant Aero was one plant, but it represents a much larger shift, a war that is no longer fought only by soldiers on the front line, but by engineers, assembly workers, and supply chains thousands of kilometers away. And in that kind of war, the side that controls production or destroys it ultimately controls the battlefield. Wars aren't only decided by what flies through the sky, but by what gets built on the ground. In Taganrog, one burning factory sent a message far beyond its walls, that in this war, even production lines are now targets. If you want to keep understanding how modern warfare is changing, from drones to strategy to the technology behind it, like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel, because the battles that shape the future often begin far from the front lines, in places you're never meant to see.